Hey friends. So something showed up for me this morning that I was almost like a little surprised by. And I was sitting, it popped up sort of early in my meditation. And because I think I've been thinking about, having a friend, a family friend who um, has had this medical scare recently, or taken a medical turn. Really, wasn't entirely unanticipated, but it was, you know, movement in the direction of an illness kind of going the way that it often goes. Um, so between that and just some some of my own reckoning with life, with my own life, I had this thought or this impression, and it came out of meditative stillness. It came from a place of not darkness or hopelessness. It felt actually like a really empowering impression. But the impression was that in some ways, our primary goal in life could be framed as a conscious death. And what I mean by that is, if we can not just accept intellectually that we're going to die, right? Because I've spoken about how context of mortality and being not just intellectually aware that human bodies die, but actually connected to the fact that our time is limited. Sadhguru talks about this all the time. I feel like the quotes, the wisdom of the universe has been finding me to that in this from this point of view recently, because I keep reading things about how being connected to the fact that we're only here for a limited amount of time is really instrumental in us using that time in a way that feels good, that feels like we're really living at our fullest. And so as I was sitting and meditating and just kind of seeing so many thoughts fall away, like it was actually kind of it was kind of a nice meditation in the sense that there's still a fair amount of mental activity happening, but my discriminating kind of choosing faculty was pretty present and able to step in pretty quickly and say, thinking. I'm not getting invested in any of these trains of thought, because they're just trains of thought. And one interesting outgrowth of that was that the trains of thought went everywhere. Like, instead of following my habitual, like, this is what I like to think about, this anger, oh, here's the pretty picture that I like to follow, instead of my like usual greatest hits playing in my head, I noticed somewhere towards like around like the last quarter of the meditation, I was like, well, that's a weird thought. I don't know, that's definitely not one I've thought very often before. Maybe this is a good sign. Maybe my mind has to work really hard to try and hook me with its addictive thought patterns, and it's like trying out new material because it's not getting the laughs it usually gets. I don't know. But anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm recognizing that conscious death, like the ability to let go of life consciously, without resistance. If we can do that, and if we are orienting everything we do in life towards that moment, which is ultimately coming and is actually, in the cosmic scheme of things, not that far away. It's only from the vantage point of a human life that's like maybe, 80, 90, maybe 100 years long, that like when you're in your 40s, you can be like, I got lots of time left. From the point of view of the cosmos, it's like the day of my death, not to mention the fact that it could happen any time, but even if it's, even if I'm blessed to live a long life, it's still almost here in cosmic terms. So gearing up for that, preparing for that, knowing that that is going to happen, and being really definitive and sort of resolved to show up in that moment prepared. If we can do that, we can do anything. There's nothing else in life that will be a greater challenge than that, or that's more, in many ways, more important than that. And I think the reason I say that, I started kind of out by saying the only goal we need, or the ultimate goal, is conscious death, is that I really think that if that were, I just noticed that as I was sitting and as I consciously reckoned with that fact, I was like, I'm meditating and I'm here, I'm becoming present so that I can be present in the moment of passing, in the moment of transitioning. That level of urgency, that level of kind of realness, it puts other decisions and other questions that I might be wrestling with or working with into context. It puts them in their place, so to speak, because if my internal orientation is so alive, my energetic system, my psychic system is so, my consciousness is so awake that I can handle that, then everything else becomes a game. Everything else becomes play. And what I don't want to do is sort of overload myself with a kind of a burdensome dark reality of like impending death. That doesn't sound helpful or attractive. But what does sound attractive is taking a moment, maybe every day, taking a moment to be clear that that's not a negotiable aspect of life. That's not something that, whether I focus on it or not, it's not going anywhere. And I'm not putting my focus on it to darken the energy or darken the mood or take the juice out of the joyful time that I do have. I think I was drawn to put my focus there because I realized if I'm willing to reflect on that, if I'm willing to be in relationship to that moment in a way that, I think it grows increasingly less abstract. The older we get and the more we practice, it's easy to kind of say we accept death on an intellectual level. It's a whole different thing to feel like we're really in relationship to that. And I think if I imagine a practice of being in relationship to that reality in a kind of methodical and consistent way, the effect is not that I become dark and fixated on the impermanence of everything, but the effect is actually that I'm liberated, that everything else I do now is no longer distracting me from something that's kind of a lot to take on, right? Facing our own death is a lot to take on. That's not just like, we don't just do that. It's not fun. There's a real sort of intensity there. And so much of the time, because there's an intensity there, because that's a hard thing to look right in the eye, we look to other things and we distract ourselves and do things that might be beautiful and wonderful and nothing wrong with them, but part of their function is to take our attention off the fact that we're impermanent. And so I think this is where my impulse to encourage myself to sort of be there, rest there, let my attention go there on purpose, and have the goal of doing it consciously, have the goal of stepping into that moment, feels really oddly liberating and oddly uplifting and empowering and enriching. Things that usually I don't associate with like a fixation on death. But it's interesting. It's having an effect that might be counterintuitive from the point of view of like our cultural aversion to thinking about our death, but from the point of view of spiritual reality and actually aligning with what is true and what a kind of ultimate end point of this particular human journey, and being okay with that, being truly okay with that consciously, watching it approach consciously, preparing to step through it consciously. That's an incredibly empowering experience. That completely redefines the notion of freedom and autonomy and empowerment in a way that goes pretty deep. So I think that's where this is coming from. I spent a couple days, nice long meditation sessions, and all of a sudden conscious death shows up. Adidas Samraj wrote a book called Easy Death, which I read years ago. Phenomenal. He was a guru in the, I think, all the way like 60s through the 90s, maybe. I forget when he died. But it makes me want to go back and read that book. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Hope you'll come back, even though I spent this entire episode talking about death. I love you. Have a good day. See you soon.